I'm imagining we're going to have some more people joining us, but those of you who are actually kind of listening and paying attention, I'd love to have your input and your views on your own fundraising infrastructure, your questions, so that we're small enough we can have a bit of a conversation. And Natalie even has the powers somehow through Zoom to press buttons that would enable you to talk if you want to say something other than just writing in chat. So I am going to pull up my slides in a minute that's going to focus our conversation. And no pressure at all, but if anybody wants to put in the chat or just shout out kind of what are your biggest infrastructure challenges when you think of fundraising and your office's infrastructure? I see more people coming on. Super. All right, I'm going to just assume that, let's see, Heidi said, how to grow the department. Yeah, that's a great question, Heidi, and I'll make sure that we address that when we're talking about staffing, and maybe in a bit you'll be bold enough to tell us a bit actually about what your organization does and what your challenges are, and we can put our heads together for you. And anybody else has? I am going to stop throughout the hour we're going to spend together to see if there's questions. But for now, I'm going to grab my slides and start to talk to you about this important topic. So, oops, we're come back to the beginning there. Natalie, you let me know if there's any technical problems, if you can't see or hear anything. But for right now, I'm going to assume everybody can see these slides. So we're going to chat about building a solid fundraising infrastructure. And, is it one of the more sexy things that we all talk about? No, we often talk about major gift fundraising or crowdfunding or, the gala or virtual gala. This stuff is super important if we're going to be successful at the rest of it. So I've grabbed a handful of pieces of infrastructure that I find important and compelling. There's so many things we could talk about, so I hope you'll find that these ones are useful to you, and we can definitely veer towards other subjects if people have questions like Heidi had on building the department. So before we talk specifically about infrastructure, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context for who I am and what the Heller Fundraising Group does. So I've got a few slides here to show you in that context. And I do want to thank Natalie and JMT for hosting us. We've done a number of webinars together, and it's always great to collaborate with them. So first things first, what does the Heller Fundraising Group do? Well, we actually have a mission. We're a for-profit company, but here's our mission. You can take a moment and read that slide. Thank you. Who do we work with? This is a smattering of current and former clients. Our company's based in New York City, so a lot of the clients have been in New York, but not exclusively by any means. We've been working up and down the East Coast, and now since the pandemic, in a variety of places around the country, including North Dakota and elsewhere. This is our team. Myself on the upper left, and 3 of the other people are actually employee staff people, and then the rest are consulting partners. And we actually have about 4, 5, 6 other consulting partners who have not yet made it to the slides. What do we do? Well, great question, Peter. Here's the answer. We don't do everything in fundraising, but these are the things we do. Feasibility and planning studies for capital campaigns. We then help with the actual capital campaign on advising and management of the campaign. We do development office ramp up, kind of auditing what's going on, helping you get to the next level. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today kind of fits in that box. And then we help nonprofits that aren't doing capital campaigns with their major gift programs. And just like we're talking today, we do training and coaching in these subjects. So let's start with some basic concepts about fundraising. I like to kind of level set and get our heads, all in the same places. This is my picture of what a fundraising program needs to do. You have to take a big pile of money and put it into your nonprofit's bank account. So everything you do in your fundraising or development office needs to address and be focused on and help improve and maximize this principle. Now, the kind of paradoxical, strange thing about that is that it's not really just about the money. You need to raise significant money, however you personally define significant for your organization. You need to raise that money for the good work that you're doing. And what the paradox is, we find that if you focus exclusively on raising the money, you're going to have some money, transactional things going on, but you're not going to have the maximized pile of money. And instead, if you focus on building relationships with donors of all types, if you focus on then the stewardship of that money, thanking people for their gifts, you end up getting sustained long-term relationships, and that pile grows, but you're not always focusing on just the money itself. Kind of interesting paradox. Another thing I wanted to point out is that, I don't need to say that this has been a really difficult, challenging, scary time. I mean, we hear it every day in all sorts of places. The thing that I do want to add to the COVID pandemic conversation, and hopefully we are continuing to emerge from that, it certainly seems a lot slower than we're all hoping, is that for me, the pandemic has made it crystal clear that if you're going to do the hard work of working at a nonprofit, fundraising for a nonprofit, even being a board member for a nonprofit, there's no point in doing it unless you really believe 100% that what that nonprofit is doing, the services or outcomes for the community of whatever kind of community is, that those are crucial, and that by raising more money, you're going to be able to do that better. Unless you believe all those things, you're not going to be able to raise money today, and it's going to make your life a whole lot harder. Like, why do that hard work unless you're excited and you can really feel that there's going to be an important impact. And I'm just going to, Natalie, I'm going to pause for a second, just in case anybody has any questions or comments before we dive in some more of the material. All right, I'm going to assume that's a no. Did I hear somebody speaking up? Okay.
Yeah, feel free to unmute if you have any questions.
Or use the chat. Either one's fine. And by the way, anybody's free to email me personally, after the webinar with any questions. Natalie will be sending that email out, but it's peter@hellerfundraisinggroup.com. You picked like the longest URL we could find. At the Heller Fundraising Group, we believe that for organizing an effective fundraising program, you need to focus on these 6 areas. And we find these coming up again and again. I'm sure there's other ways to organize it. We've picked these 6 categories as a good way to help nonprofit leaders figure out how to get themselves focused. So I'm not going to go into each of these. We've done other webinars where we focused on all of these, but today we're going to focus on that fifth bullet down, which is systems and staffing. So we're going to look at them one at a time, but you'll see that the two things are really intermixed, both systems and staffing. So again, as I said at the beginning, to do the more sort of glorious things in fundraising well, getting your huge foundation grant, or getting grants out the door, or getting some gifts from individuals, or running your gala, to do those things and to do them well, you need to have good systems in place. And I've put together a checklist. These are Peter's most important systems. I'm sure there's something I've left off. And again, these are just, this is my list. We're going to talk about some of these in detail now. I would ask you first, is there anything that anybody sees that's actually really important to them that's not on this list in terms of system or staffing problems? And again, feel free to shout out or just send it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody's in 100% agreement that these are the things. So we're going to start by looking at the fundraising database a little bit. Monthly reconciliation is part of the whole database gift accounting. And we're going to look at gift acceptance also a little bit. Gift agreement letters is not something we're going to touch on. One of the most, I think the two most exciting of these things, which is really important for anybody in the development office, is time management and task management. And we're going to look at those as well. So here we go. And again, I've just picked things that I think are interesting. There could be lots of other infrastructure things that might be relevant. So let's look at databases for a few minutes. Again, if you've got issues with a database or a database you love, be interested to know what one you're using. Would be interested to know what you're using regardless. We're always looking for advice on databases because our clients are often either trying to switch databases or sometimes they've been just throwing things on an Excel sheet. So what do you use a database for? It's really these three things. You need it for relationship building in terms of the nuts and bolts of getting out there and interacting with donors, but you need to be able to keep track of that. In order to achieve fundraising best practices, you need to keep all those records. And it's a great tool to be disciplined in your work. So here's the main things that happen within a database. Well, most of them are pretty obvious, right? You're tracking your donor information, donation history, relationships, cultivation activity. Not every database is able to do that. We like ones that can. Providing reports for all kinds of fundraising analysis and oh yeah, you also have to put all your gifts in there. For those of you who might want to look at a comparison of various databases, we find this. This is one of a bunch of sources, but this is a pretty good link. You'll get this in the slides, so no need to go crazy and jot it down now. And that's this was just a quick overview on databases. But again, any questions about databases, throw them in the chat. It looks like we're all good, and we'll just keep on going. So I said that time management and task management are my sort of favorite things. And if you get nothing else from today, this is a really exciting tool and concept. So I want to explain what's going on here. And my team and I use this as well to schedule our own our own lives and our own, our own weeks. It's something that we learn from our business coaches, and we really like it. So the way this works is most of us are super busy, and I know that I personally, if I'm not disciplined, I just kind of respond to whatever the heck seems like the most urgent or exciting thing of the day or the hour, or, sometimes that's just checking emails, which can be a really important activity, but it's not always the most important thing. So what the default diary is basically you're taking a look at your week and you are doing the best you can to block periods of time when you're going to do certain activities. Some of these things are going to be dictated by other people because you may have a supervisor who's like, like on this calendar right here, there's a weekly fundraising meeting with the ED and there's a weekly staff meeting, right? Those may be beyond your control. So there's other things. Everybody needs to eat some lunch, take some breaks. You want to put all these things into your calendar, and you want to then do your best to put the activities that you've agreed to with yourself at certain times, to do those during those times. So for instance, if you've got on this calendar, there's 3 time slots in blue for donor calls. I'm going to assume that that's actually phone calls. Let's leave actual meetings, or so phone calls or Zoom, but let's leave meetings out of this for now. So I don't know what like if I were managing somebody who was actually a frontline fundraiser, I want them to actually have much more time on their schedule for donor calls than this. But let's assume that this works for this particular job. If that's your donor call time, that's when you do it, and you don't do it at other times unless entirely necessary, right? Sometimes somebody's going to want to meet with you at a time that's not on your default diary. You have 2 choices. You can be like, thank you, I could do that, but next week. Or you move things around so you can meet with them. You have to decide on a case-by-case basis based on how important that meeting is to you. So this is not, I want to be clear that this default diary, this is not your calendar, okay? You want to have this, and then you want to have your active calendar putting things in these slots. So you could make up your slots and then have them in a different color on your Google Calendar or whatever you use. But you want to have a template that you can begin to put things into, and it takes a lot of discipline to make this work really well. I'm still working on it. I forget about it for months at a time, but then I come back to it. It's a really great tool for time management. I'd love to hear a question or comment about this. Anybody else working on strategies to manage their time and their calendar? Let's hear something that's working for somebody. Natalie, I think we have a shy audience today.
I think so.
So unless maybe like put in the chat if there's another webinar you're watching that's more engaging at the moment. Maybe that's also.
No, this is Heidi. I try to schedule thinking time. I don't get as detailed as this, and I like the detail that's there. So I really, those tasks that would like to do but never really prioritize, it's good to have in there, like updating the donor base and things like that. But I do try to schedule like a block of time and have it be blocked in my calendar, just to think rather than do, so that I can process what's going on and what needs to happen next.
Thank you for mentioning that, Heidi. That's kind of my brass ring, that in running a company, that's the most important thing. And one of the things that I forget about most frequently. And it's no matter what you're doing in your job, that thinking time is really important. And it just kind of centers your whole day. And in fact, at our company, and we're going to get to this like a little more later, but we have this is not exactly thinking time, but we have a process where every Sunday night or Monday morning, everybody who works for the company has to put in a shared Google sheet their top 3 to 6 tasks for the coming week. And then we have a team meeting on Monday mornings, and the team meeting is focused on people both celebrating a success from the previous week and then reporting on and discussing the things that they're going to be doing in the coming week. And it's somewhat related, because if you take the time to step back and think about, okay, what's most important for me this week, then you can really make those 3 to 6 things as relevant as possible. And I see, I think Matthew says we typically have weekly standing meetings for fundraising strategies. Could do a better job of carving out time to update database. I agree, Matthew. That's probably a lot of people's challenge. And one of the interesting things about that is, like, I just referred to the fact that my staff has this weekly team meeting, and we try to make it so that it's not just like a dull reporting on things, but that it's engaging and that it's useful. So I would hope that when you have a fundraising strategy meeting, which is crucial if you're a fundraising office, and if you're a big office, you probably have a few of them, is that it's helping to move those donors forward and helping the staff to move things forward for themselves as well. Thank you for those comments and shout outs. So I'm going to keep going. And again, you'll get, I think this default diary concept is pretty simple. You'll get in the slides, but you can probably grok it without the example. Oops. Okay, so this one is perhaps one of the another really exciting tool, and this is kind of we're going to talk about. Actually, you know what? Sorry to confuse everybody. I'm going to come back to this one in a couple minutes when we talk about staffing a bit more. But we're going to look at gift processing for just a minute. I don't know if there's anybody who's actually like in the gift processing department or does gift processing on the Zoom today. But gift processing is a serious thing. We had a client once that we worked with, and you would all know the name of this organization, so I'm not going to say it. They, my company's in New York City. They have an office in New Jersey, and they mostly have an online presence. And I would go over and meet with the director of development in her office and the executive director. And at one point, she opened one of her desk drawers and showed me this pile of unprocessed checks. And I was like, oh my God, why is she even like, why isn't she embarrassed to show me this? And she refused to let any other staff help her with this. And she eventually left or was fired, but it was a remarkable situation. So I hope you don't have a pile of unprocessed checks floating somewhere, but everybody has something that isn't working well enough in gift processing. You can always improve it. But let's just look at a few aspects of gift processing now. So the first thing is these cute little blue people. Gift processing is important both for the development office and for the finance office. And both of them have their own reasons for doing it. And you have to make sure that there's regular, we like to see monthly reconciliation going on between the two systems. But you need to know as a fundraiser, the money that's coming in and from whom. Like if you're responsible for raising $100,000 a year for the organization, you need to know how close you are to your goal and where that money came from. Hopefully you're putting out a monthly report. And the finance system needs to be able to let the rest of the nonprofit know how much money they have to spend. And I most of the time, this goes smoothly. A lot of the time, the reason those two people in the middle are shaking hands is a lot of the time, depending on how large your nonprofit is, and in fact, this can kind of happen in small nonprofits, but a lot of the time, the finance folks and the development folks don't talk to each other much. They're siloed. That's really dangerous. So let me show you just a few things that we have in mind when it comes to getting that gift processing going well. So we like to have people have like a flow chart of, what happens when a physical gift comes in, and then also what happens when a gift is made electronically. How does it get from, in the door or in the virtual door into the bank and then finally banked. So these are some of the steps. I'm not going to read them out loud. Take a moment and look at the steps. And I can't remember if that's my last gift processing slide. Yes. So I'm happy to entertain any thoughts, observations, or questions about gift processing. And if not, I'm going to move on. So I now want to pivot to staffing. Again, it's very related to systems, right? You need staff to do fundraising well, and those staffs need to have successful and operative systems. So Heidi had mentioned at the beginning, hers like, building your department. I worked at Columbia University for 10 years, very, very wealthy organization. We never had enough staff. It's like, it's endemic everywhere, right? Small, scrappy nonprofit serving a community somewhere to large, well-funded organizations. Of course, I think many of us know the concept of nonprofit burnout, right? Because a lot of us are just asked to do more and more with either less money or the same amount of money, both for ourselves and our salaries and for the services we need to make our departments work well. We see this happen a lot with our clients. And I think there's always a balance between an ideal picture and what you can get in reality and what's, like step-by-step reasonable. In answer, just a very simple answer to Heidi's question about building a department is, there's two big things. One is to have a rational plan so that you have an org chart for your fundraising or development office, and to know what everybody is doing. I'm going to give you a tool for that in a few minutes. To know what everybody is doing and that it's actually adding up to a larger whole to have that person there. A lot of times, I see something interesting happening, which is that somebody will get hired, there'll be a job description, they'll get hired, and then they're kind of left on their own to figure out what to do. We have an organization we're working with now where there's a really smart young woman who's been hired as their first, I think her title is Director of Advancement. She's never had a job like that before, and the organization doesn't have the institutional knowledge on what that person should do. So a lot of what we're doing is training them in kind of fundraising development office 101. But that can happen at all sorts of levels. So it's really important to make sure that the positions you are thinking about and have are logically thought out and make sense. And once you have that structure, then, the whole, do you have enough money to bring in more people? If you have like 5 people outlined in your org chart for development, do you have enough money to support those? And if not, what do you need to do to make those positions happen? And then again, once they get there, how are you going to make sure you manage those for success? So what I want to do is just look at a few different things connected to staffing. So here are some of the things that I think about. I'll let you read this. One of the things we see a lot in development offices is that, and it varies office to office, but that people are doing everything except figuring out how to reach out to the wealthiest donors in your given community and ask for stretch gifts from individual donors. That's why we help people build major gift programs, because lots of organizations are doing everything but. If anybody feels like speaking up about that, please put something in the chat or just shout out. Meanwhile, I'm going to keep talking. So, oops, I don't want to do that one yet. So I'm going to go back to the slide that I skipped over before, because this has to do with organizing your work around major gift fundraising, which is, again, a super important part of the process. It's not the whole thing, of course, but so some of you will be familiar with the annual statistics on how much money is raised from people and companies and foundations in the US every year. I think it verges on about $400 billion. Don't remember exactly what it was last year, but there's an organization called Giving USA, which comes out with statistics every year. And if you've seen it, you'll know that there's this pie chart. And that pie chart shows us that over 80-something% of the money that comes in every year comes from individual donors. So there's a small sliver, I think it's 4% or something, comes from corporations. Much larger percent comes from foundations, but a lot of those foundations are family foundations, and therefore that's really individual money. And then there's a section for bequests. Again, those are individuals; they just happen to be dead individuals, but those are based on individual relationships. So if you're getting more than 80% of all the dollars raised from individual donors, and you don't have a program in place to reach out to the wealthiest people in your community to engage with them for dollars, you're missing opportunities. So this chart, table, shows us the metrics of reaching out to individual donors. And I'm going to just go through it with you because it's pretty fascinating. So just got to move my picture here out of the way. Okay, so this looks at a 3-year period over which you would grow a program to reach out to individual donors, which we generally call a major gift program. And nobody ever starts full throttle on January 1st at almost anything except New Year's resolutions, which usually don't stick. So you'll see in the first year, we've got 0 in the first 4 months, because we're figuring, well, like say we were helping you start a major gift program right now, you're probably not going to start, this is November, you're not going to start outreach to donors for at least a few months. So we're conservative. We say like, okay, in May, you'll start your outreach. If you do what we're calling a modest effort, you're going to reach out to 4 donors and actually have 4 conversations a month. And these days, you know, pandemic, post-pandemic world, those can be Zoom or in-person meetings or phone. Used to be, it was only, we'd only count it if it was an in-person meeting. So a modest effort is 4 a month, energetic is 8 a month, and a dedicated staff is ultimately 13 a month. I see there's one question, so I'm just going to see what are. Heidi says, are these conversations or asks? That's a great question. I'll get to that first in a second. So because this takes ramp up time, you know, like the dedicated staff in that first year is really just 4 a month for the beginning, but then we're going to want that person to get up to 13. When I worked at Columbia University, I was required to have 20 meetings a month. That's so many meetings that I did it, but it's hard. So we never ask our clients to do more than 13 a month, an individual person. If there's a big office, you can have, like, these numbers can also be aggregated, right? Like a energetic effort could be 3 people adding up to 8 meetings total. But the main point here is that by knowing how many meetings you can have a month, and you need to do an audit of what the reality is, you can then put some metrics against how many meetings you can have a year and approximately how much money you'll be able to raise. Because in answer to Heidi's question, these are not all necessarily asks. So these are meetings cultivating and engaging potential donors or your current donors who you're thanking and then hoping to get an additional gift from. And you'll see that, let's look at year 2, because things are kind of solid up and running. That let's look at the dedicated staff one, because it's in yellow. So at the end of the year, if you do this, you'll have 156 meetings. And we're going to assume that only half of those are asks or solicitations. Why is that? Well, because of those 156 meetings, some of them may be with the same person a few times, and not everybody you meet with in your first meeting is going to be a good prospect to either ask right away, or there may be some reason they're not interested in your organization, and you've found that out. So we like to be really conservative, and we'll say only half of those are you going to have the opportunity to ask. Likely it's going to be more than that. And only half of those you ask are going to say yes to your gift in that year, in that time period. Again, really conservative. So then you can take this number, and let's say everybody makes a $10,000 gift, you have like $39,000. But if you've got a variegated, you know, results, hopefully by your second year, you've identified a handful of people who could give significantly more than $10,000. For some of you, that may seem like a dream or something, but it can happen even for small organizations. So over time, you see that these numbers in the last right-hand column go up because you're able to ask for higher levels of money over time. And when we train people in how to do the asking process, we really almost all the time advise people not to ask in the first meeting, so that you build a stronger relationship and you engage people in the good and important work that you're doing for the future of your community, so that they're inspired and are actually looking forward to having another conversation with you. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I'm going to stop for a moment just to do a quick sweep to see if there's any questions. And if not, I'm going to move on to what I think is our final concept. All right, thank you. Oops. All right, we've already looked at those little blue guy. So this is, it's a little fuzzy because we kind of copied and pasted from an actual Word document, but this is a really, really important system for addressing what people actually do in their jobs in a development office. And it can be used at any level of, any level of staffing. So it's actually something we also use today in our company with our staff, and we call them the priority objectives, or your annual priority objectives. Very, it's basically another word for your key performance indicators, or KPIs, but this is a very, very streamlined approach to it. And let me just explain. So depending on what your fiscal year is, if your staff are have goals and are evaluated through a calendar year, or July 1st through June 30th, you want to change it to whatever that is. And what's going on here is you want to list in very simple terms the main activities of the staff person. And you want the actual, like the person in the job, to do this for themselves. Now, if you're in a big organization that has like its own HR policies and procedures and stuff, you don't want to side skirt those. You want to follow through and pay attention to those. And there's nothing stopping a supervisor and some staff members from doing this in addition to whatever is required by HR. So here's the deal. You list the categories of things that are required for the job. I don't care how difficult your job is, you need to keep them to a single page, and you list them in priority order with the most important things at the top. And you'll see that these are written in a format, so it's a single sentence. Some of them are long sentences, like the first one, and it's got semicolon and some commas, and single sentence. The end of every one says, this was a 2007 thing, so it says throughout 2007. So these are all tasks that are important to do throughout the entire year, except if you look at number 8, it says by June 2007, because there was a reason that needed to be done by then. So these are things that sometimes one of these things will be like a big headline, but then some aspect of it is important enough. So say one of your tasks is manage all events for our organization throughout 2022. But one of the events is going to require your extra attention and has some challenges, or, make sure that the fall 2022 gala is executed with both virtual and in-person attendees. So something that's maybe a bit challenging, you want to call that out to make sure that gets pulled off well. So just a couple more things about this. So first of all, if you have this, it provides that gap after somebody's come into their job, been recruited through a job description, and then it's like, okay, that's what my job, what do I do now? So after somebody's been at their job for a couple months, you can work with them on figuring this, or you can do it right away. And then whenever you have a evaluation or a conversation about how somebody's work is going, both you and the employee, or you and your boss, can pull this out and say, this is the context for figuring out how I'm doing. And the third thing I like about this, I'm going to relate it to my own experience, is that it's kind of a self-defense mechanism for an employee. Because say, you've got your list of 5 to 8 or 9 things, and you've agreed on that with your supervisor. And then all of a sudden, somebody says, your supervisor or somebody else says, hey, you know, I want you to add doing such and such to your job. You can pull out the sheet. You can say, that's great. I'd love to do that. Which one of these things would you like me to do less of? Because we agreed these are the things, this is a full-time job already. Which one of these things do you want me to do less of? So great self-defense mechanism. And I'll just say, the other thing is, so at the end of the year, this is a useful evaluation tool. And again, you have to synchronize it with whatever, you know, systems might be used elsewhere in your organization or whatever HR might have to say about it. But you can then ask the employee, or if you are the employee using this, do it yourself, like to write up their results on each one of these things. And again, when I worked at Columbia University, this is where I was introduced to this concept. And what I did at the end of each fiscal year was that I had this agreement with my boss that these were the things I was going to do. I then wrote up a report on here's how I did with each one of these. And sometimes, you know, it was just like done, achieved it. Here's what happened. Other times it was, you know, I overachieved. Other times I, you know, underachieved, and here's why. And then because there's always supplemental things, even if you have this piece of paper and you use it as self-defense, there's always supplemental things. I would have a separate section kind of at the end of the report, additional things achieved this year. And those were either because I was asked or they just came up, and that sort of thing. So Natalie, I'm going to just see if there's any questions. Heidi, who's been speaking up, or anybody else, Matthew, or anyone else who'd like to ask anything or comment, or just let us know that you're awake.
I really like this overview of priority objectives. When I supervise, I usually use monthly accomplishments and priorities, but this fits in nicely with having an overarching plan for the year. I like that a lot.
Thanks. That's great. I'm glad to know that it was interesting and useful. So believe it or not, that's pretty much, oops, I don't know why we went blue there. Today's presentation, I have just a couple more slides. The obvious answer to what should I look for in a fundraising consultant is our team. If anybody here needs to chat with us about what's going on in your development office, we're happy to hear about it and see how we might be able to help. Our clients are all raising more money than they've ever raised before, not only by having great systems, but by using a lot of really powerful outreach techniques. And if you want to take a moment, scan this with your phone. Literally takes 30 seconds to leave us a review on Google. We'd appreciate it very much. I've done it myself. And then finally, this is some of the places you can find us. We have a pretty robust YouTube presence. Of course, we're on LinkedIn, our website, Facebook, not so much. You can look us up. And again, you can email the company at info@hellerfundraisinggroup.com, or if you want to email me directly, it's peter@hellerfundraisinggroup.com. So Natalie, I think we did it.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That was awesome. Peter and I will stick around for a minute or two to see if there's any last minute questions. But if not, I hope you enjoyed today's presentation and have a great rest of your day.
All right, and thank you, Matthew, for your comments, and Heidi for speaking up.